Some of the things that human beings do to one another that are so heinous, when you think about it from the point of view of that person whose life is being taken.
I'm actually one of those people. I am sitting on death row for nothing more than a series of lies.
In the courtroom, young defendants sometimes face life-changing verdicts that defy belief. These cases are not about routine misdemeanors, but involve extreme sentences, from surprising leniency to harsh penalties.
Of MCL 750.83, assault with intent to commit murder, a charge that carries with it potential life imprisonment.
As we explore these 15 dramatic stories, you'll be struck by the unpredictable nature of justice and the extraordinary twists of fate that make these real-life accounts more astonishing than fiction. Nicholas Lindsay. Nicholas Lindsay, a 17-year-old from St. Petersburg, Florida, was convicted of first-degree murder and appeared in Pinellas Pasco Circuit Court, facing a life sentence. The incident occurred on February 21, 2011, when Officer David Crawford responded to a 911 call about a possible burglary near Tropicana Field. The caller reported seeing a man with a brick in his garden who then jumped the fence. When Officer Crawford arrived and approached the suspect, later identified as Nicholas Lindsay, the situation quickly escalated. As Officer Crawford reached for his notepad, Lindsay suddenly opened fire, according to police records. Crawford returned fire, discharging 6 rounds from his Glock, but missed Lindsay, who fled the scene. Another officer found the wounded 25-year veteran and called for assistance. Tragically, David Crawford was pronounced dead at Bayfront Medical Center. In the wake of Officer David Crawford's death, more than 200 police officers from various Tampa Bay agencies launched an extensive manhunt. Following numerous tips from the community, authorities brought the search to a close on the evening of February 22, 2011. These tips led them to Nicholas Lindsay's apartment, where he lived with his mother, Deneen Sweat. When the police arrived at Sweat's apartment, she sensed something was wrong and allowed them inside after learning they wanted to speak with her son. She urged Lindsay to cooperate with the officers. Overcome with emotion, Lindsay confessed to the murder of Officer Crawford, according to Police Chief Chuck Harmon. Harmon noted that Lindsay appeared deeply remorseful during his taped confession, often pleading with his parents. Lindsay revealed that he had shot Officer Crawford in the stomach with a gun he had purchased on the street for $140 a week earlier. Police reported that Lindsay had fired at least 4 rounds at Crawford, although Lindsay, who was 16 at the time, could not recall the exact number of shots. After the shooting, Lindsay disposed of the gun by throwing it into a creek before fleeing the scene. The murder of Officer David Crawford attracted significant media attention, as he was the 3rd St. Petersburg police officer to die within a month. When Nicholas Lindsay was formally charged with Crawford's murder, the Pinellas County Courthouse was swarmed with reporters. Lindsay, who had previous charges in the juvenile system for truancy, faced uncharted territory with a murder trial. In court, Lindsay remained expressionless, while his father, Nicholas Lindsay Sr., wept and apologized to the officer's family and friends. Officer Crawford's partner, Stu Crisco, struggled with forgiveness. "According to my faith, I am supposed to forgive you," Crisco said. "I doubt I'll be able to accomplish that in the future, and I hope that you live to be a very old man locked up, and every single day that you are locked away, that you can think of the choices that you made that night, and all the things that you missed." In March 2012, after a week-long trial, Nicholas Lindsay was found guilty of Officer David Crawford's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Although he was tried as an adult, Lindsay's age spared him from the death penalty. Russell Burrell. In 2011, 16-year-old Russell Burrell participated in a robbery in the USA, during which he callously killed 3 people who had witnessed the crime. The court hearing that followed presented overwhelming evidence of his guilt, leaving no room for doubt. However, sentencing Burrell proved to be a complex challenge. While similar cases in the U.S. often result in the death penalty, Burrell's state had abolished capital punishment, and his age further complicated the matter. The court proceedings were deeply emotional, particularly for the grandmother of one of the victims, who lamented the irreplaceable loss of her grandchild. The brutality of the crime was underscored by the fact that Burrell had committed the murders in front of 3 children, who also lost a parent as a result. Despite Burrell being only 16 at the time of the crime, the judge recognized the necessity for a severe punishment. 3 years after the crime, Burrell was sentenced to an astonishing 90 years in prison, which equates to 6 life sentences. This ensured that Burrell would spend the rest of his life behind bars, a sentence far harsher than those typically found in many European countries, where life imprisonment without the possibility of parole is often deemed inhumane. Victoria Bascom. In 2015, teenager Victoria Bascom faced a unique punishment for a rather unusual crime. After skipping out on paying for a taxi ride, she found herself before Judge Michael Cicconetti, who is known across the USA for his unconventional sentences. Judge Cicconetti's creative approach to justice has previously included making a man walk around in a chicken costume and spraying a woman with a harmless pepper spray replica because she had sprayed someone with real pepper spray. Judge Cicconetti's distinctive punishments require 2 conditions. The offense must be minor, and the offender must have no prior criminal record. Both criteria applied to Victoria Bascom's case. Given these circumstances, the judge offered her a choice: spend 30 days in jail or walk 30 miles, about 48 kilometers, under public supervision to grasp the reality that taxi rides are not free. Victoria Bascom opted for the walking punishment and even prepared by training to build her endurance. Herbert Smith. Herbert Smith's case drew significant attention due to its initially extreme sentencing. As a young man with a record of minor offenses, Smith was already on probation when he violated its conditions by driving without a license. The prosecution sought a 13-year prison sentence for this violation, but the situation took a shocking turn when the judge handed down a staggering 60-year prison sentence. The severity of this sentence astonished the press, the prosecution, and most of all, Herbert Smith, who faced the grim possibility of remaining incarcerated until he was 80 years old. The draconian verdict prompted Smith's lawyers to swiftly appeal and renegotiate the case. Recognizing the excessive nature of the initial sentence, the judge ultimately replaced the 60-year prison term with an additional 15 years of probation. Smith was sternly advised to adhere to the law, transforming what could have been a lifetime in prison into an opportunity for relative freedom. Tiffany Cole and Emily Carr. Tiffany Cole and Emily Carr hold the grim distinction of being the youngest women on death row in the United States, reflecting the gravity of their crimes committed at the age of 19. Although their offenses were unrelated, both women were involved in shocking acts that captured national attention. Tiffany Cole, together with her boyfriend, committed a horrific crime by robbing innocent people and then burying them alive. In a separate case, Emily Carr was complicit in torturing and murdering her affair partner's significant other. Despite both women pleading not guilty, the overwhelming evidence against them led to their convictions and subsequent death sentences in Florida. Meanwhile, their accomplices, tried in different states, received life sentences. Their sentencing sparked controversy due to their age. Being under 20, they were not considered legal adults under American law. Nevertheless, the brutal nature of their crimes led to substantial public support for the severe punishments. As they live on death row, Cole and Carr attempt to confront their dire circumstances with as much dignity as possible, aware that they are destined to spend their remaining days behind bars. Lance Tiernan. In 2012, the case of American teenager Lance Tiernan captured national attention as he stood trial for the death of another teenager. Initially, it seemed likely that Tiernan would receive the maximum sentence, with the prosecution advocating for a lengthy prison term due to the crime's severity. However, the court proceedings took an unexpected twist. Despite the initial evidence suggesting his guilt, Tiernan demonstrated a profound sense of remorse. Additionally, camera footage emerged indicating that the death might have been accidental rather than intentional. This new evidence and Tiernan's apparent contrition led the judge to issue a surprisingly lenient sentence of only a few months in prison. The leniency of this sentence provoked widespread outrage across the country. Many were shocked that someone convicted of manslaughter would receive such a brief prison term. The relatives of the deceased were particularly dismayed, maintaining that Tiernan had acted with full intent. This case remains controversial, underscoring the complexities and emotional turmoil often inherent in judicial decisions. Martise Fuller. In Kenosha County, Wisconsin, 15-year-old Martise Fuller faced trial for the murder of his ex-girlfriend and the attempted murder of her mother. Fuller was accused of breaking into his ex-girlfriend's home and shooting her while she was listening to music in her bedroom. After hearing the gunshots, the mother confronted Fuller and was shot twice but survived. She later identified Fuller to the police. Despite pleading not guilty, Fuller was convicted on all 3 charges. It was only after the verdict that Fuller displayed any emotion. During his sentencing, he addressed the court with a prepared statement, expressing sorrow to the victim's family and asserting his innocence. "I wanted to write this, giving my sincere apologies to this family I once shared time and love with," Fuller said. "I apologize for the suffering you have endured and for the loss of my beloved ex-girlfriend, Kaylee. However, I must continue to assert my innocence, as I truly am innocent. I hope that one day you will see that I am not the person the media has portrayed me to be." The judge responded firmly, stating, "I have no confidence that you will never commit such acts again. To protect the public and acknowledge the gravity of your crimes, the court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Fuller received a life sentence without the chance for release. He appeared indifferent to the verdict, accepting that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Roxana Sikorsky. In 2014, 15-year-old Roxana Sikorsky committed a chillingly brutal crime by attempting to murder her younger brother in a savage manner and also targeting her parents. Thankfully, both attacks were thwarted just in time. Sikorsky was subsequently brought to court to face charges of attempted murder. Despite her heartfelt apology, the court determined that the severity of her actions warranted an exceptionally harsh sentence. Roxana Sikorsky was sentenced to an astonishing 90 years in prison, one of the most severe sentences ever handed down to a teenager. This sentence ensures that Sikorsky will spend the remainder of her life behind bars. Danta Wright. In 2017, 18-year-old Danta Wright appeared in the Washtenaw County Trial Court in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to face charges related to the murder of 18-year-old Jordan Klee. Klee, a senior at Pioneer High School and a standout football player with aspirations of joining Michigan University's team, tragically never saw his dreams come to fruition. He was found dead on October 4, 2016, at Pine Lake Village Apartments, with a gunshot wound to his head. The police were quickly alerted to the scene, and an investigation was launched after determining that Klee's death was a homicide. Danta Wright, along with Delrano Gracie and Jermarius Ellison, were identified as suspects based on various tips. All three were teenagers at the time and affiliated with a street gang. In a shocking revelation during a June 2017 hearing, Wright admitted to killing Klee with the help of his accomplices.
Did you kill him with that shot?
Yes.
He explained that the crime occurred during a failed robbery attempt, during which he shot Klee in the back of the head. 1 month later, Wright made a disturbing appearance at a Washtenaw County courthouse, where he faced the victim's family. The proceedings took a dramatic turn when the judge nearly rejected a plea deal due to Wright's appalling behavior in the courtroom. Wright was seen smirking and almost laughing while a family member read an impact statement from Klee's grieving mother, which caused many in the courtroom to weep. When Danta Wright addressed the court, his behavior further inflamed the already irate Judge David Swartz. Instead of expressing remorse for his victim's family, Wright chose to give a shout-out to his own family, showing no signs of contrition.
I'll be home soon. R.I.P. Keon. I love my family.
Judge Swartz, visibly frustrated by Wright's attitude, questioned whether the proposed sentencing agreement was too lenient.
Watching you sit there, smile, and laugh, and shake your head like this was no big deal.
With Wright grinning, laughing, and displaying a dismissive demeanor, the judge remarked, "I am very tempted to reject this plea deal.
To just say, I'm not going to accept this sentence agreement, we'll go to trial, and
If we go to trial and you are convicted of felony murder, you will spend the rest of your life in prison. That means your life is essentially over." Following this, the court took a brief recess to allow the prosecution to decide whether to accept the judge's suggestion and proceed to trial. Ultimately, Jordan Klee's family chose to forego the trial, fearing further trauma from the proceedings. When the court reconvened, Wright's attorney apologized for his client's conduct, attributing it to emotional issues Wright was facing. Judge David Swartz then sentenced Danta Wright to 23 to 50 years in prison for the murder of Jordan Klee, a sentence reflecting the seriousness of the crime while acknowledging the impact of Wright's egregious behavior in court. Jennifer Mee. In 2007, 15-year-old Jennifer Mee gained national fame due to an unusual case of severe, uncontrollable hiccups. Known as Hiccup Girl, Mee's quest for a cure led her to appear on various national television programs. Her hiccups, which had persisted for over a month,
on Friday night when that news broke,
were eventually alleviated by Dr. Bob Lind's treatment, briefly returning her to the media spotlight. However, after her hiccup ordeal, Mee's life took a troubling turn. In June 2007, she was featured in a newspaper article about her home run, but her situation worsened over time. By 2010, she was reported missing in St. Petersburg, Florida, signaling the start of a downward spiral. Mee's troubles escalated with her involvement in a criminal scheme. At 18, she, along with Lamont Newton and Laren Rayford, formed an armed robbery ring targeting individuals they met through social media. In October 2010, Mee lured Shannon Griffin, a 22-year-old man, to an empty house under false pretenses. Once there, Griffin was ambushed by Newton and Rayford. Griffin was shot multiple times with a .38 caliber handgun, and the assailants stole less than $50 from him before he succumbed to his injuries. The suspects were apprehended shortly after Griffin's murder, as they had been living together, making their capture relatively straightforward. While Jennifer Mee was not the one who fired the weapon, all three individuals were charged with first-degree murder due to their involvement in the crime. Attending a court hearing in Pinellas County in November 2010, Jennifer Mee tried to persuade the judge to grant her bond. Her hiccups and loud tears were accentuated by the microphone as she stood beside attorney John Trevino, who pleaded with the judge to release her on bail as she posed no flight risk, even though she remained silent throughout the session. Doug Bolden, Griffin's cousin, mentioned how thrilled Griffin was about his date with Mee when he spoke at the hearing.
He was going to go on a date. He just thought he was going on a date. Just a young college-age kid grinning ear to ear, about to go on a date, just happy as could be.
the judge remanded Jennifer Mee in jail after hearing Doug Bolden's impassioned plea, and she was denied bail. Jennifer Mee was convicted of first-degree murder and given a life sentence without the possibility of parole by Pinellas County Judge Nancy Moat Lay about 3 years after Griffin passed away. Jennifer Mee clutched her head with her hands while shedding violent tears as soon as she heard the decision. She had a shocked expression on her face, as if she had just realized that her life had failed. As she was taken out of court to serve out the remainder of her term in jail, Jennifer Mee continued to cry. Mackenzie Shirilla. Mackenzie Shirilla, known as Hell on Wheels, gained infamy due to her involvement in a tragic accident that resulted in the deaths of her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and his friend, Davian Flanagan. On July 31, 2022, the 17-year-old Shirilla crashed her Toyota Camry into a large brick building at a speed exceeding 100 miles per hour at the intersection of Progress and Alameda Drives in Strongsville, Ohio. Russo, 18, and Flanagan, 17, were pronounced dead at the scene, while Shirilla survived and was hospitalized. Although Shirilla claimed to have no recollection of the crash, her subsequent actions raised concerns. While recovering in the hospital, she attended a wheelchair-accessible music concert, sought modeling opportunities in Los Angeles, and even created a TikTok video dressed as a corpse. These behaviors were highlighted by the prosecution during her trial for the double murder. The prosecution also presented evidence of threats Shirilla had made in the weeks leading up to the crash and detailed her turbulent relationship with Russo. A witness testified that Shirilla had threatened to crash her car during an argument with Russo. The trial's outcome was significantly impacted by video footage of the accident, which Judge Nancy Margaret Russo described as chilling and tragic. She emphasized the footage's stark depiction of the horrific nature of the crash and the severity of the tragedy. During the sentencing on August 14, 2023, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo emphasized the premeditation involved in Mackenzie Shirilla's crime. She pointed out that Shirilla had visited the route of the accident a few days before the tragedy, underscoring the deliberate nature of her actions. Judge Russo stated she had a mission and she carried it out precisely. The goal was to die, illustrating that the case was one of intentional murder rather than mere reckless driving.
This was not reckless driving. This was murder.
Shirilla was convicted of the murders of Davian Flanagan and Dominic Russo and received 2 concurrent sentences ranging from 15 years to life in prison. As she was shackled and led out of the courtroom, Shirilla sobbed uncontrollably, marking the beginning of her lengthy prison sentence. Aiden Fucci. 14-year-old Aiden Fucci appeared in St. Johns County Court in Florida, facing grave charges related to the murder of his schoolmate, Tristan Bailey. Bailey, a 13-year-old cheerleader from Patriot Oaks Academy, lived in the same neighborhood as Fucci in Durban Crossing. On the night before her death, Fucci persuaded Bailey to leave her home and meet him at a friend's house. Surveillance footage later captured what appeared to be Fucci and Bailey walking near Saddlestone Drive, close to where Bailey's body was eventually discovered at the edge of a retention pond. Fucci brutally attacked Bailey, inflicting 114 stab wounds, 49 of which were identified as defensive. Bailey was reported missing on May 9, 2021, after she failed to return home. During the search, Fucci posted a Snapchat photo of himself with a peace sign behind a police car with the caption, "You were with her, Aiden." Bailey's body was found later that day, prompting an immediate murder investigation. Fucci was arrested on May 21, 2021. Initially, Aiden Fucci denied any involvement in the murder of Tristan Bailey. However, as the investigation continued, his account changed. Fucci fabricated a story that Bailey had injured her head during an argument. Despite his claims, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Investigators gathered testimonies from acquaintances and his girlfriend about his violent fantasies and discovered a knife matching the one used in the crime. Blood-stained clothing and shoes were also found in his home. On February 6, 2023, Fucci pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Given the premeditated nature of the crime, he was tried as an adult. During his court appearance, he offered an apology. Judge R. Lee Smith, who had seen many cases over his 16-year career, described this case as one of the most disturbing he had encountered.
This was not done out of greed. It was not done in retaliation.
On March 24, 2023, Fucci was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Shondell Jackson. At just 18 years old, Shondell Jackson faced sentencing in Milwaukee County Courthouse for the murder of 21-year-old Nathan Potter from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Jackson, who had planned a robbery with an accomplice, resorted to violence when Potter couldn't provide money, fatally shooting him. The following day, Jackson fled to Mississippi, but was captured after his uncle tipped off the authorities. Throughout the trial, Jackson's conduct was unsettling, marked by inappropriate gestures and faces directed at Potter's grieving family. Meanwhile, Jackson's mother discovered the details of the crime from television news reports. When Judge R. Lee Smith handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole,
Jackson to life imprisonment without possibility for extended supervision.
Jackson reacted with intense anger and distress, unable to contain his emotions in the face of his harsh sentence. Brandon Spencer. Brandon Spencer, then 19, faced 4 counts of attempted murder in Los Angeles County Superior Court, following a shooting at a crowded Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus. The incident, which resulted in injuries to 4 people but no fatalities, led to Spencer being charged after the LAPD located him in a nearby parking lot. Prosecutors argued that the shooting stemmed from a dispute between Spencer and a rival gang member. Despite Spencer's claims of innocence, the jury found him guilty. The courtroom was filled with nearly 50 of Spencer's family and friends during the sentencing. His reaction was so intense that sheriff's deputies had to restrain him. Spencer was sentenced to a prison term ranging from 40 years to life. Jacob Morgan. Jacob Matthew Morgan, a 17-year-old with autism, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the tragic death of his 14-month-old half-brother, Joshua Hill, in a house fire. The fire, which occurred in Rock Hill, South Carolina, led to Joshua's death in March 2015. Morgan pleaded guilty in court, visibly emotional, and admitted to starting the blaze. Morgan's family was steadfast in their support. His mother, Julie Hill Dover, and his stepfather, Mike Hill, claimed that Morgan was asleep when the fire started and argued that he was unfairly coerced into confessing. They also said he was prevented from rescuing Joshua by neighbors who restrained him. Prosecutors argued that Morgan's actions showed malice, citing his failure to seek help and multiple conflicting statements about the fire's origin. Fire experts noted evidence of 2 separate fire origins and Morgan's previous fire-related incidents. During a preliminary hearing, Morgan broke down in court, expressing deep regret for his brother's death. Morgan was sentenced to 5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 10 years for unlawful conduct towards a child, and an additional 15 years for arson, though the latter was suspended to 5 years probation. His murder charge was dropped as part of a plea deal. His stepfather described Morgan as a gentle soul and not a cold-blooded killer, while his lawyer highlighted the case's complexity and the challenges Morgan would face in prison. Even though age can sometimes limit the full application of the law, justice is still pursued in some measure. The severity and unpredictability of these legal decisions prompt us to consider the intricate nature of justice and the various factors that shape legal outcomes.